Alright, no countdown video on this. Just getting right to it. We're gonna be talking Brandon Swanson, 19-year-old missing college student. I believe he's been missing for 10, 12 years now. Coming home from a party. Let me turn this radio down. I believe coming home from a party, he took a little detour, a little back road, so to speak, because I believe he had a DUI, and he was trying to avoid the popo. And there's different accounts of like how much alcohol he had. He was a small guy. I don't think he's barely over probably 120 pounds. I think he was like blind in one eye or legally blind in one eye. That's good if you mix that together. It just happened in Minnesota, and like a flat field. Some people believe UFO may be in this story. If I could find a video from the guy from 411, he talks a little bit about it, and he believes that it could be UFO. Man, I just got my hair cut. I actually cut it myself. I just cut the sides in the back and kept the top. You can't really see it because of the blurry. But let's go ahead. That's neither here nor there. Let's go ahead and get into. We're gonna play a couple videos. This is a video here, I believe. This is a TikTok video. And this is a guy where I believe where it happened here. So let's just go ahead and start off and play this.
Lincoln Lyon County Road in Minnesota. This should be almost approximately the exact same spot where Brandon Swanson crashed his car. Now, I know I made a video on, I'm sorry about the audio on this. I left my microphone at home, forgot all about it. But I made a video on Brandon Lawson in Texas, and a lot of you guys
he was
were
bound
saying,
to believe
Brandon Swanson is who you're thinking of. I am on 160th Lincoln Lyon County Road.
Oh, you look at the
Minnesota.
background.
This should be almost approximately the exact same spot where Brandon Swanson crashed his car. Now, I know I made a video on, I'm sorry about the audio on this.
I thought they were showing the background like an alien or something popped up here.
I am on one.
All right, let me go ahead and get to some other videos here that I believe I have loaded up. Yeah, a lot of stuff's coming up where they believe aliens was involved in this. That seems to be, and then there was another guy, Brandon Lawson, who's missing in Texas, and I believe they found him. The name sounds so much, like there. I'm just going through, looking at the videos right now. Let's go ahead and just play this one here. I think I got to back it up.
While on the phone with his dad.
All right. Yeah, this is a pretty good one here, I believe. And I will give credit to True Crime Treadmill on this. Let's just go ahead and play it.
Brandon had become just absolutely and totally lost while driving along these long, empty gravel roads late at night. Brandon was so lost that when he missed a turn and high-centered his car in the ditch on this road, he called for help, but sent his parents in the wrong direction. Frustrated when they couldn't find him, Brandon set off on foot, abandoning his vehicle in favor of walking to meet up at a place that they would both know. But Brandon was 25 miles away from where he thought he was, and in what will turn out to be one of what is surely a series of unfortunate mistakes, Brandon chooses to take a shortcut through an abandoned farm field. It was during this shortcut that Brandon utters his famous last words, "Oh shit." This case is definitely one of the eerier cases that I've covered. Where did Brandon go? Why was he so lost? Investigators won't rule out foul play because even after all these years and many thousands of hours spent searching for Brandon, his car remains the only piece of evidence ever located. Found stuck right here.
I mean, look at that long, flat field. And how many cases do we find where we find a car when we don't find them? Right, like this case, Maura Murray, Brandon Lawson. It was just talking the comparison to this one. Jason Landry. Did I say Jason Landry? Maura Murray. This case, yeah, so many where you find the car. Dane Elks, I believe his name. You find a car, you don't find the person. Hell, even Crystal Rogers.
Here is where missing person Brandon Swanson completely disappeared. May 13th, 2008 was the last day of classes at Minnesota West Community and Technical College in Canby, Minnesota. 19-year-old Brandon Swanson had just wrapped up a one-year program in wind energy and was spending the evening celebrating and saying goodbye to some of his friends. Canby is a small town in rural western Minnesota, and things out here are spread out. Brandon didn't live in Canby. He commuted here for school from Marshall, Minnesota, a roughly 35 to 40-minute drive, a drive that he made frequently that past year. Brandon actually did a lot of driving on the night he disappeared. His mom, Annette, saw him for the very last time when he stopped by their house that evening. She said that everything seemed normal, and when he came to say goodbye, she said, quote, "The things I normally say to him. See you later, and be safe." At about 6 p.m., Brandon drove from his home in Marshall to a small gathering in the nearby town of Lind. After spending a few hours in Lind, Brandon drove to a party here in Canby. And not a lot has been made public about either of these parties, but sources indicate that this second gathering was larger than the first one. Now, Brandon is just 19, and witnesses do admit that alcohol was being consumed at both of these gatherings. But his friends told law enforcement that Brandon didn't seem intoxicated, and there aren't any reports of how much Brandon consumed, at least while at that first party in Lind. The timeline is, of course, kind of fuzzy, but Brandon arrived in Canby sometime around 10:30 that night, and I did come across an account of someone seeing Brandon have at least one shot of whiskey at this party. Other attendees reported that Brandon seemed happy and not drunk or impaired. They recalled him chatting with friends and reported no behaviors that indicated that he was heavily intoxicated. Again, the timeline is unclear, but it appears that Brandon didn't stay for very long, leaving the gathering sometime between midnight and 1 a.m. This is an unfortunately wide and vague time frame, but understandable, I suppose, if you imagine that the college students are preoccupied with having a good time and not really watching the clock. And as we head out and actually leave Canby, I just want to be clear about where we're going. I'm taking you east of town to the location of Brandon's car. Not the way he went, I'm sure, and I'll get into that a bit more later, but we're on a journey in the general direction, at least, of Brandon's travel after the party in Canby that night. Friends in Canby remembered that he left the gathering alone, and at least one of them believed that he was simply headed home for the night. However, Brandon never made it home. And this is when Brandon's fuzzy timeline becomes really so much more than fuzzy. It's muddy, it's mysterious, and it's confusing. Because anywhere from 1 to 2 hours later, he will be calling his parents asking for help. His car is stuck, and it got stuck, driving the wrong direction on a minimum maintenance dirt road that he honestly never should have been on. What was going on? Why was Brandon driving out in between rural fields when he could have just taken the highway home?
I think to avoid the cops.
Minnesota State Highway 68 is a well-maintained road connecting Canby and Marshall, Minnesota. It is no doubt the most direct route from Brandon's location at that party to his house. It's paved, and it supports vehicles driving at highway speeds. I will stop short of guaranteeing to you that Brandon drove this highway to his classes daily. But I will say that Brandon most certainly had driven that highway before, and I believe that it is the only obvious choice for someone wanting to drive between these two towns. But this is not that highway. Again, we're driving straight east of town because, for whatever reason, this night Brandon does not drive home on Highway 68. Instead, Brandon was driving on gravel back roads. And we know this because at 1:54 in the morning, Brandon called his parents for help. While attempting to make a turn on a gravel road, he had gotten his car stuck in a shallow ditch. Law enforcement estimated that this had happened closer to 1:15 in the morning. Brandon had spent about half an hour trying himself to get the car out and had called several friends for help before he resorted to waking up his parents.
It's always last resort.
Brian and Annette Swanson get this phone call in the middle of the night, and they immediately set out in their pickup truck to look for their son. Brandon told them that his car was stuck in a ditch between Marshall and Lind. And Lind is only 7 miles away from where they live in Marshall, so not far, really. Brandon tells his parents that he's on the left side of a road, near to the golf course just off of Highway 23. Brian and Annette drive around looking for him, but can't seem to find him. Again, Lind is only 7 miles from Marshall, so it doesn't take long to arrive at this location where they're expecting to find their son. Brian told CNN that Brandon was absolutely positive that he knew where he was. Yet, as they drove along those highway-adjacent gravel roads, there was no sign of Brandon. Now, it was late and dark. You know, for authenticity, I suppose I could have filmed this drive at night, but you wouldn't be able to see anything. Out here, when it's nighttime, it is really dark. There are no street lamps, no bright city lights. On this particular night, there was just a half moon and the stars in the sky. Brandon's mom, Annette, decides to capitalize on this darkness and use it to their advantage. It's her idea to use the headlights on their truck to try to find Brandon. They're still on the phone with him, and so they tell him to look out into the darkness, where it is so dark and so flat and rural that he will be able to see their flashing headlights and know where they are. Desperately, she tells her son that they're flashing their lights, but Brandon can't see them. He flashes his headlights, and Annette says that she can even hear the sound of him clicking them on and off over the phone line. But all she sees is darkness. "Don't you see me?" Brandon asked. But there was nothing, his dad Brian said. Absolutely nothing. After a few minutes of trying this headlight trick and failing, everyone grew frustrated. Brandon was absolutely confident that he knew where he was. Annette said, "At one point, he hung up on me, so I called him back and apologized." Growing impatient, Brandon decides that instead of waiting for his parents to find him, that he will walk to meet them. Someplace they all know. He tells them he's going to walk to the Lindwood, a bar and grill in Lind. It's not far. He can see the lights from Lind in the distance, and it will just be faster if he meets them there. Equally frustrated, at this point, Brian and Annette concede to this plan. Brian drives Annette back to their home in Marshall, and he proceeds to the Lindwood. Brandon abandons his vehicle on foot. It was already late, after 2 a.m., and pretty cold. Temperatures hit a low of 39 degrees that night. Brandon was reportedly wearing baggy jeans, a polo shirt, a black hooded sweatshirt, and a Twins baseball cap. So, not exactly dressed for an outdoor excursion in that weather. I imagine he was hustling, not just to get home, but to keep warm. Brandon stayed on the phone with his father while he walked. At some point during this conversation, he tells his dad that instead of following the gravel road that he's walking along, he's going to cut across a field. And his dad says that he tells them that he's going to do this because it will be quicker than following the road. So, Brian stays on the phone with Brandon while he trudges through this random field in the dark. They talk while he hops a fence, and then another.
So being cold, I always think of that, hypothermia always could be in the equation.
At one point,
Look
he
at this, this
mentions that he can
cornfield.
hear water nearby.
What is it
All of
with
this
like
just to get home,
UFOs
to get back
and cornfields?
to his parents, to get to Lind sooner. They talk for 47 minutes while Brandon walks.
Wow.
Then, mid-conversation, something happens. Something surprising or scary or painful. Something happens, and Brandon calls out, "Oh shit."
Oh shit.
And the call goes quiet.
Never good.
"19-year-old Brandon Swanson was described as big-hearted and kind. He loved reading, learning, and debate, politics, history, and music. Academically, he was a dedicated student that had just finished a one-year program in wind energy at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. For the following fall, Brandon had enrolled at a school about 200 miles away, Iowa Western Community College in Council Bluffs. There, he planned to major in science. Brandon was described as reliable and had spent the last 4 years working part-time at a local Hy-Vee grocery store. He was close with his family,
Get my
his
camera light
parents,
on.
and his younger sister, Jameen, who was about to graduate high school. Generally, Brandon was a healthy young man, but I do think it's important to note that he was legally blind in his left eye.
Left eye.
He wore glasses to correct his eyesight and was reportedly wearing them the night he disappeared. By all accounts, Brandon was smart and intelligent. But all young adults make mistakes sometimes. He had previously been charged with
Guilty of
driving
that.
under the influence and had worked off a year of probation. Did Brandon deviate from the safety of Highway 68 because he had been drinking and was trying to avoid detection from police? Alternatively, had Brandon gone off course because he had gone somewhere else? Was there a third party at a farmhouse somewhere that had brought him to this area? The last thing he had said was, "Oh shit." And after that, the line went silent. Brian called out for his
thought they heard
son
water
into the
splash
phone.
or something.
When Brandon did not respond, he hung up and immediately called him back. He called 5 or 6 times, but Brandon never picked up the phone. By now, it was after 3 a.m. Brian drove up and down the road looking for Brandon. He called Annette, who called all of Brandon's friends. No one knew where he was. Brandon's friends recognized the severity of the situation, and several of them joined his parents, searching all night long, driving down gravel roads and through farmland. But there was no sign of Brandon or his car. The whole thing made Annette feel nauseous. As soon as she could, 6:30 a.m., Annette called the police to report Brandon missing. But Brandon was 19 now and an adult. Officers pointed out that it would not be unusual for a 19-year-old to stay out all night celebrating the end of classes. Annette later recalled that one officer told her that at his age, Brandon, quote, had a right to be missing.
It is true,
But
though.
Brandon was clearly not out still celebrating with friends. He had called home for help. He had been coming home. Brian and Annette could not just leave him out there. So they continued to search for him without the assistance of law enforcement.
I wonder when they
All
started
morning,
looking
they
for
made
him.
phone calls and drove
law
rural roads
enforcement.
looking for their son. They continued to call Brandon's phone, which would ring repeatedly before finally turning over to voicemail. Brandon never picked up. By noon that day, somebody at the sheriff's office had also recognized the severity of this situation, and they had reached out to Brandon's cell phone provider, who, in addition to backing up Brian and Annette's claims of a late-night phone call for help, provided location information with regards to where Brandon's phone had been at the time of those calls. And while Brandon believed that he was walking to the town of Lind, the phone records showed that Brandon had been nowhere near there. In fact, he had been more than 25 miles away in between the towns of Porter and Taunton.
Wow.
This information from the phone company allowed officers to rather quickly locate Brandon's green Chevy Lumina, high-centered off of this road
20
that
miles
doubles as
away
the
from where he
Lyon-Lincoln County line.
thought he was at.
Now, I've actually seen a few pictures online that claim to show Brandon's car in the ditch. However, I've not come across any real ones because Brandon was driving a green Chevy Lumina. Many of the photos feature a car that is gray or silver or not even a Chevy. I don't know why or who they think they're fooling, but these pictures simply are not of Brandon's car. It's kind of frustrating to see this type of blatant misinformation spread so rampantly. But this here is what a green Chevy Lumina looks like. And no, this is not Brandon's car. Certainly, I hope that the sheriff's department does have pictures of his vehicle, how it was found that very day. But since I don't have them, I'll just describe the vehicle how the sheriff's departments have described it. Lyon County Sheriff Eric Wallen said, quote, "There was nothing odd about it. If a person passed by, they would think it was just parked there or broken down and stuck," end quote. Lincoln County Sheriff Jack Vizecki said, quote, "It was off the side of a field approach and the vehicle was hung up. It's sort of a sharp incline. Nothing major, but enough that the car would get hung up so the wheels are too high off the ground to get any traction," end quote. And when Sheriff Vizecki called it a field approach, he meant it. It appeared that Brandon had been driving west on a road that was hardly even a road. I mean, much less of a road than this is. It was more like a dirt tractor path between two fields. Here's a recent satellite image of that field road. This road is not passable anymore, or at least I don't think it would be in a sedan, and I'm not going to be driving it. If it wasn't before, it's surely now considered private property, and I'm not here to break any rules or do anything that threatens my own safety. Instead, we are driving down the road that Brandon was trying to turn onto, this one right here, and it intersects the field approach where Brandon got his car stuck. So to be clear, this is not the route Brandon drove. I have really no way of knowing what route he took or how Brandon got here because, honestly, it makes absolutely no sense at all to me. And I should also just break it to you now that I'm not going to be getting out and walking like Brandon did. Not only do we not actually know which direction Brandon went, but it really did come down to a safety issue for me. Where was I going to park my car? The field approach where Brandon got stuck? What if I high-centered my own car? Or what if someone needed to exit the field while I was parked there? I couldn't just pull over along a shoulder. There are no shoulders here. I also really wanted to film in the evening, and Brandon's walk was long. I worried, was I going to be able to cover everything in time? Where would I be when it got dark? The more I learned about this case, the creepier everything sounded. Staying in my car was also just a way to cover more distance and to show you all more of the area, give a truer picture of the vastness of the farmland out here. In the 17 years since Brandon has disappeared, it doesn't really seem to have changed that much. I did pull a satellite image from that field road in 2008 for comparison. And you can see the path that Brandon took, but there is still no conceivable reason that I find that puts Brandon on that road. On a larger map, you can see that Brandon was driving west, the wrong direction, away from home and back towards Canby, where everyone thought he had started. Why or how he got turned around is so uncertain and unclear to me. Most of these rural roads are just a big grid. It should not have been hard to head south and east towards Marshall without getting lost, even on back roads. Google Maps was available for mobile phones in 2008, but it was in its early stages and just wasn't as popular as it is today. I highly doubt that Brandon had GPS on his phone, because if he had and it was working, he wouldn't have been this lost. Somehow, Brandon believed that he had already crossed Highway 68 and was south of it, south of Marshall even, by miles. Not only did he believe it, but he believed it adamantly, such that he had hung up on his parents in frustration when they were unable to find him. Could he have been impaired? True Crime Garage's podcast on Brandon brings up an early newspaper source that has stated that a pipe had been found in Brandon's car. But there was no mention of what kind of pipe. Was it something used for drugs or plumbing? I could not find this source, and I didn't come across any other mentions of a pipe or other claims that Brandon used drugs. In fact, Lyon County Sheriff Joel Dahl has said that he has no reason to believe that Brandon was impaired at the time of the accident or during the calls with his parents. Despite that shot of whiskey, both Brandon's parents had spoken with him on the phone that night, and neither believed that he was drunk or otherwise impaired. Brandon's dad spoke with him on the phone for nearly an hour. Both parents called him lucid and coherent. I mean, maybe he was just tired, but it is so very clear to me that Brandon was incredibly lost and confused. As we approach the place where Brandon's car was found, I'd like to point out that not much time has elapsed since we left Canby. Not near enough time to make it south of Marshall. So again, we don't know exactly Brandon's route, but we do know that he was much closer to his starting point than he believed himself to be. I do feel the need to just quickly explain all of the different sheriffs that I'm quoting, because I know what you're thinking. Just so far, we've already had Eric Wallen, Jack Bizecki, and Joel Dahl, and you're thinking, oh yeah, this is a lot of sheriffs to keep track of. And it is. But the reality is that this road is the border between Lyon and Lincoln counties. So law enforcement from both counties were involved in Brandon's case right from the start. And actually, up until now, we've been driving through the Yellow Medicine County. Officials from the Yellow Medicine County will also become involved in the search for Brandon. Agents from the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension will as well. There will be a lot of different law enforcement agencies involved. Search agencies too. Brandon's case is about to capture the attention of people everywhere. This is the place that Brandon's car was found. Nothing within the car seemed disturbed. The sheriff's office reported that nothing unusual was found at the site of the vehicle, and there was no evidence of foul play. Brandon left his car here and ventured off on foot. He told his parents that was the plan. They talked on the phone while he walked along this gravel road. Unfortunately, officials had difficulty determining exactly which way Brandon went. Sheriff Bizecki on the road, so it's possible to leave that vehicle and not leave any tracks. In an incredibly unfortunate coincidence, sources reported that portions of the road had been graded just that morning. resurfaced, possibly obscuring any tracks Brandon could have left. Searchers fanned out in all directions, slowly walking the fields and pastures. An airplane was brought in to look for clues from above. Brandon's friends and family were optimistic. "We've got to be upbeat," his sister Jameen said to the Marshall Independent. Investigators cleared the scene and towed his car that afternoon. I ran across some people online claiming that Brandon's wire-rimmed glasses were found in his car. But the Grand Forks Herald reported that Brandon's glasses, car keys, and cell phone have never been found, which is completely contrary to the idea that they were left behind. The following day, law enforcement brought in search dog teams from South Dakota and the Twin Cities. One dog led investigators down this road south from the car before turning west, which was regretfully away from the highway and back towards Canby. Perhaps Brandon believed that the lights that he could see were from Lind when he was actually seeing light from the small town of Porter? Just as one might expect based on their phone conversation, the dog followed Brandon's trail along gravel until entering a field near the driveway of an abandoned farm. From there, the dog roughly followed the course of the Yellow Medicine River. The Yellow Medicine River, which we're about to cross, is really less of a river and more of a creek or a stream in this area. And that's not to say that it can't get deep or be dangerous, but you'll see in a minute when we cross it, these aren't huge bridges and it's not a lot of water. But its size can depend a lot on the time of year. In the spring and early summer, the Yellow Medicine River is at its fullest and its depths can range from knee-high to 15 feet. At the time Brandon disappeared, officials noted that it was flowing high
Beautiful
and fast.
drive. Man, I can just imagine making that drive.
So the dog, trailing Brandon's scent, jumped into the river at one point, but it quickly jumped back out with, quote, "good purpose of movement," which indicated to handlers that the trail continued. The dog went north through a field, but lost Brandon's.
The same thing, I believe, happened in the. Let me get this. Come here. Oh, down. Whoa. Yeah, the same thing happened. Whoa, jeez. Okay. The same thing happened in the Jason Landry case where the dog jumped in the water and jumped out, and Sebastian Rogers too.
Sent just short of another gravel road. At the time, Sheriff Dahl called this field with the river, quote, "the only area the dogs are interested in." Initially, officials were confident that Brandon would be found in the river, and many of the first searches were focused on the Yellow Medicine River exclusively. There are approximately 2 miles of the river in this area, and it took officials 6 hours to cover those 2 miles on foot. Sheriff Vizecki told journalists that he personally walked the river each day for 30 days.
Man.
But despite his repeated efforts, no evidence of Brandon turned up. Okay, and I just have to point out really quick here, the semi-truck going down Highway 68 to the left of us. These trees sort of block the view, but you see the dog following Brandon's scent turned right at this T intersection coming up. But if you were to turn left here, you would very quickly run into the highway. That truck's pretty small on your screen, but had there been any cars going down the highway at that time of night, Brandon surely would have been able to see their headlights.
Yeah.
2 weeks after Brandon's disappearance, volunteers joined the rural search covering areas previously uncovered. Officials also brought in 3 certified HRD, or Human Remains Detection dogs, and their teams. They searched the Yellow Medicine River for miles across both counties, but the search dogs showed no interest. The second weekend of June, a massive search descended on the area. Teams with cadaver dogs, searchers on foot, horseback, and ATVs, even an aviation group with special low-flying vehicles and parachutes participated in the search. A former dive official from nearby Winona County volunteered their services, as well as members of the nonprofit Minnesota Search and Rescue Recovery Unit. This here is where officials think Brandon may have left the road, by the way. It's the driveway to that abandoned farm, and behind it, the river, where so many thought that he would be. Everyone was confident that Brandon would be found. Lyon County Sheriff Joel Dahl said, "If I had to lay any money down, I'd say we're missing him somewhere in the water. He's in an eddy somewhere, being held down by a log. He's got to be here. Everything is consistent that he was walking and something happened to him." Sheriff Izeki felt that Brandon was likely the victim of a tragic accident and cautioned that if he had gone into the Yellow Medicine River, it could take weeks for his body to emerge. However, the belief was that the body would eventually emerge.
If it's underwater, yeah.
Yet, weeks turned to months without any answers. The John Francis Foundation joined the search, a group focused on extreme rural and wilderness searches. Specialized teams equipped with underwater sonar devices were deployed. But even when summer came to an end and the water level in the Yellow Medicine River had gone down, nothing of any significance had been found. These days, officials are no longer convinced that Brandon fell into the river. Sheriff Izeki believes that if he had fallen in, he would have been found by now, either in the river or downstream.
When did he go missing?
Brandon's parents agree.
Let's see.
They were hopeful that if Brandon had fallen into the water, that he had gotten back out. The bloodhound had followed Brandon's scent into the river, back out, and then north, through this field just to our left. For the most part, Brandon's family has stopped participating in the actual search. Annette said, "Being too close brings in that emotional part of it, which is a dangerous place to be." End quote. Instead, they collect donations to fund the search.
So he has been missing since May 14, 2008. Was that is that 17 years ago? So he'd be like, what, in his 30s? 36? Is that right? 35, 36 he'd be right now?
Bring food and beverages to those out in the fields. They put up posters and speak with the media to share Brandon's story. Here is near to where the dog lost Brandon's scent. Search manager Jeff Hassey of Search, Rescue, and Recovery Resources of Minnesota noted that when a dog stops trailing, it doesn't necessarily mean that the trail ends. It could simply mean that the dog is at the end of its capabilities, or its, quote, nose time.
Oh.
In Brandon's case, the dog had already followed his scent for nearly 3 miles, which Jeff considered to be a relatively long trail. Still, because the scent was lost close to this gravel road, people wondered, could Brandon have encountered a vehicle? Cold and wet, did he accept a ride from someone? Someone who hadn't come forward.
Yeah.
Lincoln County Sheriff Izeki considered the possibility of foul play, saying, quote, "The only thing would have been if someone was in the shadows. And they got him that way. I can't say there wasn't someone else, but I can't find any evidence of it." Unquote. The lack of evidence seemed to frustrate the sheriff. After 3 weeks, none of the search dogs were getting a scent. Izeki couldn't explain it, couldn't explain how after all this time they hadn't found anything. That fall, after all of the corn and beans had been harvested and the fields cleared, they brought in 10 cadaver dogs. But still, they turned up no evidence. No keys, no phone, no clothes, no bones, nothing. Hundreds of volunteers and multiple dog teams from several different states covered many dozens of square miles, but nothing surfaced. Every weekend, Brandon's family searched for him until finally winter fell over Minnesota, and the snow made searching impossible.
Hmm.
The following year, Brandon's family was responsible for the enactment of Brandon's Law. Regardless of a person's age, the new law required officials to take a missing persons report without delay if someone was missing
Good.
under dangerous circumstances. Together, Brandon's family attended the signing of the law by Governor Tim Pawlenty early that May, less than a
His
year
sister, his
after
dad,
Brandon's
and his mom,
disappearance.
looks like.
Searches for evidence of Brandon continued. Initially, they had focused on areas closer to his car, based on the idea that Brandon would be found somewhere where that oh shit moment happened, so to say. But when nothing turned up, they had to consider that perhaps he had kept going. Using search models to determine how far he could have walked that evening, search teams diligently covered a 140 square mile area of interest.
Wow.
The search area is always bigger than you suspected, said Jeff Hasse.
Okay. Yeah, I'm willing to video there. It's a wonderful video. Credit to, I believe, the True Crime Treadmill. So yeah, man, check them out. Very thorough. I didn't even get through the whole video there, but man, wow. Yeah, that was really good video. I thought too that maybe he there was a noise like with when it sounded like it went underwater, the phone or him, and they thought he went into the water. Let me see. I'm gonna try to find this video here where this might be it. Oh, he did it. Okay, Lore Lounge did one on it too. I just watched them on. They did Sebastian Rogers. Yeah, trying to find it. It might have been a whole clip. They were talking about Brian Lapisa and Brandon Swanson, and the 411 guy read an account that someone had in that same location where they believe they saw a UFO. I might if I put it in. I know I've seen this video before. $16, 17 years ago. There's a good bit of videos on him. Here's one. This looks like they show a what he would look like now. Age progression. Wait, I think I might have had it there. It looks like he's just showing stuff off of a computer. Yeah, he does delay time. I'm looking for like an age progression of what or a flyer that I could put up with more information. I know he was 19. He went missing. Oh God, what was it? May 14th, 2008, I believe. He was a college student, and I don't know if they mentioned this or not, but I think he worked like at a grocery store, and he was going to college. I can't remember what he was going to college for. I know I seen a short video before that they played that really goes into like him. They just took the whole thing off. Okay. All right, guys. Yeah. This one might be a little bit shorter. If I could find that 411 video, I'll show that. But yeah, that was a pretty good third video of him. A lot of similarities to Jason Landry, and I think I will do that one in that case. And then there's a Brandon Lawson. So there's Brandon Swanson and Brandon Lawson, but Brandon Lawson, I believe, was found. So I can't remember. Yeah, I think I was in Texas. But yeah, that's it. I mean, trying to think, like, what did I think happened? I think maybe hypothermia is a possibility. They just haven't found him. And then, like, somebody was saying, I was doing some reading, some research on it, and out there in the farms, they have like farm animal traps and things like that. And then they had, I forget what it was called. Oh shoot. It was something they have on a farm that like they think he may have sunk into. I can't remember man what the name of it was. I think it was on Reddit. And I was reading it, or it was in one of the comments, and I was reading it, and man, when I read it, the hair on my skin on my arm stood up. Because I didn't know that these things existed. Yeah, so if you're looking, I'm reading this off. This has just come up. I don't know if this is Reddit or AI, but here's the top theories: accidental death. Believe that he may have fallen into the yellow Medicine River, which she was talking about, and then a hypothermia. Simple explains fell into the river and then eventually succumbed to hypothermia. And like I said, there's a bargaining period. Like when you go through hypothermia, you burn up. So a lot of people will jump in water, take their clothes off, and then I think like the last stage of it is you go into bargaining, where you just take your body and you jam your whole body into a tight space. And then cover up by farmers. This is a theory, but there was something that they said that they have on those farms that they believe that he could have fell in. So the cover up of farmers, some suggest Brandon may have been accidentally killed by a farm, machinery, and an accident was covered up by the farmer. If the farmer worker operating isn't as easy as to see as what you could hide the body rather than have it explain the accident. So let me read that again. Or even if he hasn't, it's easy to see why they would hide the body rather than have to explain the accident. I mean, I would think like, something like that happened. You just say, hey, look, I woke up this morning to plow field, and then I found him inside my, there is a small majority who believe Brandon may have been abducted or attacked. The other theory that I believe was some credence in that he may have he made it to the road 160th Avenue and was lucky enough to be picked up by someone. Yeah, there's always that where you get in a car with somebody. So I don't know if I ever shared this story, but when I was right before I went into the Navy, I wrecked my car. I believe I've swerved. I thought it was a dog. It was a dog or a small animal. And I was probably going too fast. What I was doing, I was getting ready to move in with my cousin, and I was going back home to get the rest of my belongings. I was literally living in my car at the time, and my cousin was going to let me move in. He had an apartment with him. And then I went back in the middle of the night to go get the rest of my belongings. But I went a route I never went before. And I swerved an animal. And I lost control of my car. My car spun around, hit a telephone pole, and then caught on fire. And it was instant how quick it caught on fire. And I jumped out of my car. Actually, it was a convertible. And the convertible top rolled back like a sardine can. and it was electric power, and then the window stuck, so I had to jump out of the car, and then I think I had whereabouts for my keys, and then I grabbed my trunk, I grabbed my suitcase that had like the rest of my clothes in it, and it was close, man, because the flames were coming at me, and I was, like, got it real quick. And then I'm walking off, my car's in flames. I'm walking down the road, and I'm flagging people down. And this lady, it's probably around my age now. I was like 20, 25, 26 at the time. She picks me up, and I'm thinking, like, man, and you could smell alcohol in her breath, like she was driving. And then she dropped me off at a gas station. And then they called an ambulance, and then they took me in, to the hospital. But anyways, like, I got in a car with somebody, like, if that woman, who knows, could have overtook me or took me somewhere. So, you get in a car with somebody, you never know. Middle of the night, nothing good happens after midnight. So he, like I said, he could have gotten in a car with somebody too. I don't know, like, if he probably wouldn't get in a silo unless, like, he was doing the bargaining. But there was something, man. I'll have to look it up, and it may have been on like a comment. But there's in these farms, I guess in the Midwest, there's, I don't know what they're called, but it's like something they think like he could have, like, I don't want to say a sinkhole, but it was like something where he could get down in and he wouldn't be able to get out of. And I saw that theory too, but I haven't heard it mentioned, on any of these YouTube channels. Because, but if I had to guess, I would say it had to do something with hypothermia. Which there's a lot of cases where there's missing people where I think hypothermia could have been involved. Maura Murray's one, Jason Landry for sure. This one, yeah, just right off the top of my head. But anyways, yeah, it's about an hour. It's going to be a little short. If I could find that 411, whoops, what the hell did I just do? If I can find that 411 video, I'll probably play that, and then I might do a second part to this. If not, maybe move on to Jason Landry, or I need to do a female. There's a lot of females missing too. It just ends up, I don't know. I don't want to sound sexist or anything, but like for me, I don't know what it is, but like when men go missing, and I hate to say this, like for women, you're very vulnerable. And like for me, just getting in a car with somebody 26 years old, I'm like, hey, I'm not a big guy, but I could probably handle myself, especially being a woman, or if it's one guy, same thing. I have buddies that, like he broke down, he got in a ride with, the truck driver. But like you're a woman, you got to be real careful with that stuff. And then, you're more of a target. But yeah, I need to do, I'm not sexist. It just seems like I've done Missy Beavers, but that was a murder. There is some cases. Maura Murray, God, that's a long one. And I would like to maybe my niece, get her in that one. Or one of my nieces or my brother, we all followed Maura Murray. That's a big one. Probably the most popular missing case, one of the most popular. But yeah, man, once again, like I was talking about the other case, I can't remember, I just did. Oh, Josh Amos. Like you gotta feel for the family. And it's pretty cool that they got that law passed, to help to give back and play it forward to, help with other cases. Because so many times in these cases, when you're over 18, he's probably at a girl's house or, passed out, in a dorm or something, or, he decided to go on a road trip, didn't tell anybody. And, the saying, they always have a right, if you're over 18, you're adult, you have a right to go missing, if I just said, F it, I want to go missing, and I want to, like all the people in my life, I don't want him to find me, you know. And, you know, I think this, you know, that, you know, I played the Michelle Whitaker thing, you know, like with Bryce Lapisa too. I think that's a big possibility where, you know, he could have just said, hey, look, I'm going to start a new life, get away from, you know, the life I had, you know, and then, you know, they could get in contact with you and you can say, hey, look, tell them I'm all right, but don't tell them where I'm at. You know, because, you know, I did all this to get away from the, you know, that life or those people, so to speak. But yeah, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I don't want to say like I'm going to do one video for sure because it can change, but yeah, man, you know, prayers for the family. You know, hopefully Brandon Swanson, something happens where they find him, or, you know, alive, hopefully, but if not alive, you know, if not alive, closure for the family. That's got to be, you know, imaginably tough, tragic to not know, you know, where or what happened to a family member years later, 16, 17 years later. It's a long time, you know. I mean, he probably had like uncles, grandpas, you know, maybe even parents pass on. I don't know. But yeah. All right. Be good. Thank you. God bless and take care out there. Good night. Sweet dreams.